The origins of tug of war are uncertain, but this sport was practiced in Cambodia, ancient Egypt, Greece, India, and China. According to a Tang dynasty book, the notes of Feng, tug of war, under the name hook pulling, was used by the military commander of the state of Chu during the spring and autumn period, 8th to 5th centuries BC, to train warriors. During the Tang dynasty, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang promoted large-scale tug-of-war games, using ropes of up to 167 meters with shorter ropes attached, and more than 500 people on each end of the rope. Each side also had its own team of drummers to encourage the participants. It is possible that the teams held hands when pulling, which would have increased difficulty, since hand grips are more difficult to sustain than a grip of a rope. Tug-of-war games in ancient Greece were among the most popular games used for strength and would help build strength needed for battle in full armor. Tug-of-war stories about heroic champions from Scandinavia and Germany circulate Western Europe, where Viking warriors pull on animal skins over open pits of fire in tests of strength and endurance, in preparation for battle and plunder. 1500 and 1600 tug-of-war is popularized during tournaments in French chateau gardens, and later in Great Britain. 1800 tug-of-war begins a new tradition among seafaring men who were required to tug on lines to adjust sails while ships were underway and even in battle. The Mojave people occasionally used tug-of-war matches as means of settling disputes. Tug-of-war is a sport that pits two teams against each other in a test of strength. Teams pull on opposite ends of a rope, with the goal being to bring the rope a certain distance in one direction against the force of the opposing team's pull. The Oxford English Dictionary says that the phrase, tug of war, originally meant the decisive contest, the real struggle or tussle, a severe contest for supremacy. Only in the 19th century was it used as a term for an athletic contest between two teams who haul at the opposite ends of a rope. Prior to that, French and English was the commonly used name for the game in the English-speaking world. There are tug-of-war clubs in many countries, and both men and women participate. The sport was part of the Olympic Games from 1900 until 1920, but has not been included since. The sport is part of the World Games. The Tug-of-War International Federation organizes world championships for nation teams biannually, for both indoor and outdoor contests, and a similar competition for club teams. In England, the sport was formerly governed by the AAA until 1984. But is now catered for by the Tug-of-War Association, formed in 1958, and the Tug-of-War Federation of Great Britain, formed in 1984. In Scotland, the Scottish Tug-of-War Association was formed in 1980. The sport also features in Highland Games. Between 1976 and 1988, tug-of-war was a regular event during the television series Battle of the Network Stars. Teams of celebrities representing each major network competed in different sporting events, culminating into the final event, the tug-of-war. Lou Ferrigno's epic tug-o-war performance in May 1979 is considered the greatest feat in battle history. Aside from the raw muscle power needed for tug-of-war, it is also a technical sport. The cooperation or rhythm of team members play an equally important role in victory, if not more, than their physical strength. To achieve this, a person called a driver is used to harmonize the team's joint traction power. The driver moves up and down next to their team, pulling on the rope, giving orders to them when to pull and when to rest, called hanging. If the driver spots the opposing team trying to pull the driver's team away, the driver gives a hang command. Each member will dig into the grass with their boots and movement of the rope is limited. When the opponents are played out, the driver shouts, pull, and rhythmically waves their hat or handkerchief for their team to pull together. Slowly but surely, the other team is forced into surrender by a runaway pull. Another factor that affects the game is the player's weights. The heavier someone is, the more static friction their feet have to the ground, and if there isn't enough friction and they weigh too little, even if they are pulling extremely hard, the force won't go into the rope. Their feet will simply slide along the ground if their opponent have better static friction with the ground. In general, as long as one team has enough static friction and can pull hard enough to overcome the static friction of their opponent, that team can easily win the match.